I'm really a guy who lives out in the woods. Don't have any of those special fancy titles. But I am a father, and I want my children to live in a Christian nation. And I want my children to live in a Christian nation.
All right, well, welcome back to the Lone Bulwark. So a few weeks ago, I did a tweet, late night, as I sometimes do, and it was about worldview, and so it created a sort of firestorm in a small little, niche of the Twitter world, and got a few people upset and some people scratching their head. It was about worldview. But anyway, American Reformer did a symposium with a series of articles. I think there was like 5 or 6 of us who did articles, and I was one of those. And so, check that out, American Reformer, the Worldview Symposium. And I contributed one, and I hear there's going to be a podcast with all those people together talking about it, which will be very exciting. Some of those people I haven't talked to in a long, long time. I know all of them. So very excited about that. Well, I'm going to give you kind of the content of the summary of my contribution to that symposium. So that's what this is, so I hope you enjoy it. The title of the piece is Our World and the Modern Liberal Worldview. So, Our World and the Modern Liberal Worldview. So, here we go. Now, Christian worldview thinkers, in my view, they need to reject modern liberalism. And that's because, in my view, modern liberalism, despite what they say, and perhaps not everyone, this is true for everyone, it actually animates them. It animates them the most. So that's the first point I'm going to make in this talk. And the second one is, the second point is that they need to expand their worldview beyond mere suppositions. Worldview tends to be attached to presuppositionalism. It needs to expand beyond that worldview, which is very objective. Worldview, like objective things, but worldview must encompass the subjective things. And I'll define that more as I proceed. But I consider the subjective things of life actually the principal goods of this life in this world. So you'll have to wait for my explanation on that. But first, the first point, as used by Christians, worldview is far too analytic in explaining why people hold this or that belief in society. The average person on the street, did not acquire his beliefs by simply applying his presuppositions. It wasn't a matter of deduction. It wasn't applying these known underlying suppositions, and therefore you can attack those, because that's not the reason why he got his beliefs. His beliefs are not a consequence of rational inference or deduction or whatever. I'm sorry, it sounds elitist, but it happens to be true. Now, the person's strongest beliefs, and the strongest beliefs are not those that they'll scream on Twitter about. It's a sort of beliefs that when questioned or contradicted will incite in him a passion to exact social costs on that person who disagrees. Okay? That person has a contrary opinion, and instead of saying, I'm going to debate you, I might even yell at you, they actually want to see that person socially damaged in a way. Or they'll act as if, well, that's just the consequence of having that opinion. I didn't do it, but that's just so they will actually want there to be social costs. But these beliefs, these strongest beliefs, are formed in him by society. Society says what is praiseworthy, and it says what is blameworthy. And all this stems from a foundational social dogma. Okay? In modern liberalism, you are free to be whatever you want. So they say you can express yourself however you want, but you must abide by this foundational dogma. And this is what it is. Each is entitled to his strong moral opinions. You can have very strong moral opinions if you want. And you can decide upon the meaning of your own existence. But those opinions must remain personal, not a matter of public policy. That is the thick conceptions of the good. That is the comprehensive ideas of what is good and what is bad must be separated from politics. So liberalism, at least in appearance and theory, restricts and suppresses what is the classical praise blame function of society, or at least it appears to do that because, well, you can believe whatever you want. But of course, you still have to believe the social dogma. And that's why this liberal restriction on the good is just a mere superstructure. It is a mist-enveloped appearance. At the foundation of liberalism, there is indeed a thick conception of the good, namely that bare humanity, or just humans as such, stripped from their culture, ethnicity, gender, religion, etc., is the animating concern of society. Bare humanity is the animating concern of society and its institutions. So the universal is elevated above the particular. The mere human is greater than the particulars that distinguish men. So civil society is a mere human space with unlimited identities and none claiming dominance over all the others. Only the right to be is what people claim. I just want to be. Thus, in liberalism, our differences are reduced to public expression. Those are differences. Our differences are merely public expression. Right? Their identities, they're simply identities relative to others. No one can assert dominance in public policy, nor claim to be the core group of the political community. All right, so for this reason, liberalism is and has proven to be an effective strategy for who? Well, minority ethnic groups in the West. For it effectively dispossesses majorities from their traditional claims to the homeland. Their countries become a huddled mass of humanity, a melting pot, a nation of immigrants, united around a set of universal liberal propositions. And so it is no surprise that after World War II, new buzzwords were popularized, such as human dignity, natural rights, nation of immigrants, and of course, the imago Dei, the Christianized version of human dignity. So in modern liberalism, a nation is simply a space reserved for abstract humanity. That's it. It is a space reserved for the abstract man. Now, so this is what I call the humanity principle, and that is the foundational dogma of our age, and it animates virtually all thought in American society, including those who use the Christian worldview analysis. Indeed, the humanity principle infects the full range of Christian theologies on offer today, with one very notable and exception. The principle is Christianized, right? The humanity principle is Christianized, and it's draped in Christian garb. So we're told that our hope is in a heaven of all nations, not our earthly nationality. We're told that you are more like a Nigerian Christian than your secular American neighbor, and that the civil realm is a common kingdom for common humanity. And so it should be multicultural. And also that the church is multicultural, so bring the nations to our doorsteps. So Christian worldview, from dispensationalism to also theonomic postmillennialism, at least for some, has been syncretized with the fundamental modern liberal principle. Again, so you can reject liberalism and still be infected by this. Okay, you could say, I'm no liberal, and yet you still are fundamentally animated by the social dogma you've been socialized into. And so, when people talk about a merely Christian society, which is, again, the hope of some, this is merely the theologized version of a merely human society, right? So they're taking out particularity and they're still universalizing. They're still making it, it's just the difference is that now it's a Christian society, mere Christian, which is the Christian version of the mere human society. All right, so, but despite the claims of toleration, some identities are off limits in liberalism, right? So you can be whatever you want, you're free, you can do this and that, you have freedom of speech, just say whatever you want, but that's actually not the case. You cannot be anti-Semitic. You cannot be racist, at least to non-whites. You cannot be misogynist, and a few other things that keep expanding and contracting in relevance for some reason. But whether this or that group can speak positively or negatively about another group is asymmetric, right? So Jewish academics and columnists for decades have been writing screeds against whites without any defunding or threats from donors. This is why it's asymmetric, because this cannot be reciprocated. right? They can freely say things, but no one can say anything back. So anti-Semitism of late on university campuses has generated calls for defunding and censorship. Think of places like Columbia. Meanwhile, there's been rampant, decades-old anti-white ideology that has proceeded in these institutions for decades, with almost no disturbance, no calls for defunding. No one seems to care. So likewise, non-white groups can say what they want with impunity, if it isn't anti-Semitic. Non-white groups can attack whites all day long. And this is a version of what Eric Kaufman, a sociologist, has called asymmetric multiculturalism. And this is the situation in which all minorities can have ethnic solidarity, even a negative or oppositional identity against the majority, while the majority can have no such solidarity. That is, unless they're self-oppositional, that is, they are self-hating. So the majority cannot have solidarity in a positive sense, it must be in a negative sense. So in saying something positive about a member of the group of the majority, we must individualize him, ascribing to his, explaining his positive traits to him as an individual, not as a group. But when some positive group characteristic is unavoidable for the majority, that is something good that the majority tends to do, that trait is declared to be merely human. It's a discovery of humanity, only accidentally connected to the majority group. Thus, the positive features among majorities are either individualized or they're universalized. See that? So when say a sort of white majority does something good, that is individualized and of course and then universalized into broad humanity. Okay. So however, the majority are treated as a distinct group only when one says something negative about them. So there can be a sort of solidarity amongst the majority, but only when you're speaking negatively about them. So sort of you can think of like white guilt. Think of a legacy of racism, something like that. You can treat them as a group when it's a negative attribute, but not when it's a positive attribute. So Christians, for their part in all this, they attribute positive features to, say, Western man. They attribute it to grace or divine providence, not something about the Western civilization or the people that inhabit or produce that civilization. It's due to grace or divine providence, right? So in this sense, the positive feature is universalized by a universal religion, namely Christianity. Again, there's that universalization. That is fundamental to the liberal social dogma, which is a universality, okay? So the social dogma, it animates, this is important, not only belief, but action. Okay, so by establishing what is blameworthy and then praising those who do the blaming, public moral worth is determined by one's actions against the dissenters from the humanity principle. All right? So social opprobrium keeps people in line. Thus, even in a society, this is important, with extensive free speech protections, there are great social and financial costs to violating the social dogma. It is not costly to fly a rainbow flag, but it is costly to fly a Confederate flag. It is not costly for universities to be anti-white. It is costly to be homophobic, anti-Semitic, or transphobic. Now, social dogma is most clearly revealed when otherwise very smart people see no need to refute the violations of social dogma. That is, they see no need to actually demonstrate to the contrary of their claims. They simply can what? They can psychoanalyze, they can morally denounce, or they can ridicule you. They call you feds or Nazis, or you're on the take from Putin or Qatar. You have an authoritarian personality or have ethnic vainglory. Christians, they theologize the opprobrium stating that you've denied the gospel, you're an apostate, your church should discipline you, and, quote, you wouldn't like the cultural diversity of heaven. How many people have heard that before? So far from eschewing the world, Christians have simply Christianized the prevailing system of praise and blame, finding their Christian moral worth and their good work in enforcing the humanity principle. That is, you are godly to the extent that you enforce the Christianized version of modern liberalism social dogma. Okay? So since prevailing social dogma offers confidence to its enforcers, that is, you're confident in it because you've been socialized into it, many Christians act in confidence only when they enforce that social dogma. Right? They need to infuse that social dogma into their faith, and then they think they're acting in faith when they're really acting with the confidence supplied by the social dogma. They are actually weak in themselves. And so they borrow confidence from modern liberalism. They delude themselves into thinking they're enforcing basic Christian orthopraxy, but I suspect that for many, their confidence in Christianity actually depends on the syncretizing of Christianity with the social dogma. And then they get a confidence found outside of the faith that then shores up their faith, because they actually have a weak faith in itself, but they need the social dogma and they need to Christianize it. And then borrowing from the confidence of society, they are confident in their faith, right? And my guess is that their enforcement of these social dogma produces a sort of addictive euphoria. I'm sure they get a sort of thrill every time there is some sort of incident in which now they can express how they're anti-racist or they're anti-Semitic. There's a sort of euphoria involved in it. They can act in confidence finally. With all the uncertainty in the world, now I can act in confidence, right? So, but now in classical liberalism, at least as described by John Locke, atheism and gross impiety should be punished, right? That's John Locke said that. Because God, even if it was, say, the God of the philosophers, was still the underlying principle of society. In modern liberalism, however, we have not the eradication, but the subversion of divinity. Okay, it's not atheism, but a subversion of Christian theism. These two truths, that there is a world to come and that humans share much in common, that is, there's a common humanity, those two truths are subverted to deny majorities a strong and exclusive claim to a particular place. Instead, it's as if the gospel demands that you must be rootless in heart, that your heart must dwell in heaven, and you must relegate your particular loves to your politically irrelevant identity. The only thing that fundamentally matters in liberal society is your humanity. You can care a great deal about your particularity. You can proclaim it from the rooftops, you can fly all the flags, but in the end, your distinctness, what you're very proud of, must be nothing but an expression of identity among other identities. All right, so one corollary to the human principle is what I call the nomadic principle. Now, since your particular ancestral connection to a place is relegated to the personal, or to an identity among identities, you cannot assert an intergenerational claim to the place of your people. You cannot follow someone like Edmund Burke, who spoke of the eternal society, which he identified as the linkages of the dead, living, and unborn to a people and to a place. The living in liberalism do not inherit a place from their ancestors. Rather, the dead labored for humanity. That is, they labored for an abstraction, just as our soldiers fight and die, not for us, but for humanity, to make the world safe for democracy, right? So likewise, the living do not labor for the future, for future generations that spring from them, their kin or their friends. They labor for future humans who will come from everywhere and they will form a nowhere. In modern liberalism, the powerful element, that is the nowheres, recreate in society their own state of existence. That is, they're nomadic, they're deracinated, and they're cosmopolitan. But don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. This is important. Don't be fooled. They'll congratulate you and praise you for loving your granddaddy's old farm. They'll smile and they'll say, that's good. That's good. It's your identity. You can deeply love your identity. But the moment you say, this land is the land of my people, you're toast. At heart, you must be nomadic and have a weak claim to the land of your people, right? So Christians eventually came to Christianize this nomadic principle through expressions such as, this world is not my home, or America in the end will burn, or we're just pilgrims passing through, or the church is your only people and place. So theology serves to conform us to the humanity and to the nomadic principles. We have therefore a theological justification for a strong, or alleged justification, for a strong Christian identity that makes only weak public claims for itself. You are but an identity among a sea of identities, and when we stand boldly for Christ, we're merely expressing our identity among others. And for this reason, no one cares. No one cares. Express away, Christian man, express away. Just keep your identity out of politics, or go ahead and be political, but fuse that Christian political witness with the social dogma. The clearest expression of all this is in Kellerism. That's from Tim Keller, where Christian politics is simply the work of making the Christian identity as winsome as possible. That's what Christian politics is. Not about politics, not about achieving political pursuits. That's just a happy effect. The point is that you will make the Christian identity among all these other identities winsome, and mainly for coastal elites, of course. So the politics is then not for political ends. It's for shaping a public identity or our moral witness in the service of evangelizing coastal elites. So ironically, for all their talk of antithetical worldviews, Christian worldview thinkers are some of the fiercest advocates for the modern liberal presuppositions. And they piously enforce them among their fellow Christians. Indeed, the worldview mentality, in my estimation, opens the Christian mind to this very thing. Because if you affirm antithetical worldview without a fundamental critique of the nomadic, of the humanity and the nomadic principles, this makes every worldview simply an identity among identities. And all the various Christian organizations and thought leaders from left to right, they encourage us to speak up and to engage. But none seem to realize that we're just adding to the cacophony of shouting.
The Nathanael Green Society is a Protestant organization dedicated to serving the state of North Carolina and the United States broadly. Their mission statement is, "With thanks and praise to God Almighty, be it known that the Nathanael Green Society is established for the purpose of mentoring men in the esteemed cultural and folk traditions of America, with a particular reverence for the heritage of the great state of North Carolina. Our mission is to engage men actively in the local community, churches, and various civic organizations, fostering a robust sense of community and civic duty. If you are a conservative Christian man with a desire to employ your time, resources, and unique skills for the sake of your state and nation, then reach out for a membership application. You can contact them at nathanaelgreensociety@protonmail.com. That's nathanaelgreensociety@protonmail.com. You can also send a direct message to their official social media account. You can find the link and additional information about the society at nathanaelgreensociety.org.
All right, so the second point I want to make is, as I mentioned in the introduction, this is just our world. Our world. That's the title of this section. So with all this emphasis on humanity, we've lost a basic element of it. Okay, we've emphasized humanity, but we've lost some basic truth of it. That is to have a strong connection to people and place. The abstraction of humanity has suppressed a basic human good. As I alluded to earlier, one problem with worldview is that it's far too suppositional. Since it can only contend with suppositions about a purely objective reality, it has little interest in and it downplays subjective elements. So in this section, I want to reframe worldview a bit to make it, say, more humane. So to state my point directly, the highest goods of earthly life are good because they've taken on features that are subjective. Now, I'm not talking about standpoint epistemology or any such thing. I'm saying that the highest things in earthly life, that is what we care for the most, are experienced and known subjectively, based on relation to a people, place, or a thing. So the clearest example of this, and I've used this in many contexts, is the difference between a house and a home. Everyone can affirm, this is a house. Everyone can affirm this is Sally's home. But only Sally and anyone else in that household can experience this house as home. The experience and knowledge of this house as home is exclusive to Sally and her household. It elevates the house for them beyond market value, beyond material, into something higher. And it is essential to their well-being. The principal features of life, that which we cherish on earth more than anything, require the addition of an exclusive subjective element that elevates these things from pure objectivity. Such elevation it's required for the complete human good, and it is the principal part of our earthly life. So what does this have to do with worldview? What I want to suggest is that we, at the very least, allow worldview to be applied beyond the mere suppositional, the more analytical sort of mode. Human beings are world creators. Our activity in the world takes objective reality and it generates a subject-object relation such that at the most basic level, these things and places become familiar to us. Familiarity is foundational for an array of attitudes or sentiments present in these relations. There is comfort and anxiety and responsibility and warmth, solemnity, sacredness, memory, sacrifice, and many, many other attitudes. So places and things can be adorned with such familiarities and even become enduring conduits of love from loved ones long gone. And these people, they left traces of their labor behind. And then the living receive these things as gifts to be conserved and improved on for future generations. So our world is not simply the world, objectively speaking. Our world is one adorned with these subject-object relations. It is a life world, the world enlivened by our activity across generations. Each of us has a world, and these are different from each other's, though each world overlaps and it's irreducible to an individual. It is, in other words, intersubjective, meaning that our relation to places and things is bound up with others. A family together has a intersubjective relationship to the house. The love of home is bound up with a symbiosis, the living together. Our being with and our living together is the ground of our shared social world, the basis of our common particular loves. So Roger Scruton once called this the soul of the world. Now, our life world extends far beyond the house. It goes to the town, the county, the state, the nation. And these are not mere economic zones, but places of our concern, love, responsibility, struggle, and sacrifice. They are the places of our loved ones long dead who gave them to us, and they are the future homes of our progeny for whom we labor today. So if it is true that the intergenerational connection of people and place is a necessary and principal human good, then that good needs to be secured. It is not enough to reduce it to an identity in modern liberalism. It must be an object of policy. But that requires us to reject the humanity and nomadic principles described above. Mere humanity cannot be the foundation of a political community. Rather, the foundation must be the shared world of its inhabitants, those loves that are exclusive to them. So the proper thinking of worldview must encompass this reality. Elevating worldview beyond mere universal suppositions, our world is ours. It is worth conserving to the honor and the good of those whom we love. All right. So thank you for listening. And that ends my article and essay from the last few days. So thank you again.